of a last 5 weeks here, but my goodness, guys, I mean, it ended the way that I think it at least gave me just that comfort of being like, yeah, this ended on a good note. I don't know about you guys, but like I'm sad that it's over, but they ended it well.
Absolutely. It was maybe like the greatest ending sequence I've ever seen in a documentary. The Pearl Jam or whatever it was playing was beautiful and perfect. So it was awesome.
Yeah, man, I'm happy because it was so good. I'm sad because it's over and now like it flew by. These 5 weeks flew by. I'm also really freaking mad at Jerry Reinsdorf. Someone's lying in this documentary, and I have a really good idea on who it could be here.
Yeah, it came away with that ending there and allowing MJ to watch what Reinsdorf said in terms of coming back and going for that seventh. I, God, it made me cringe because the entire buildup to this entire thing. Oh, it's Jerry's, or it's not Jerry's idea. It's Jerry Krause's idea. It's Jerry Krause's idea. It's Jerry Krause's idea. It's everything about him. He wants to rebuild this. He wants to tear this down. And then all of a sudden, after everything that's been said and the backstabbing that obviously did happen, here we are, and Jerry Reinsdorf saying, come back for one more year. Why not? Like, nothing adds up. Absolutely nothing adds up.
It's tough because Phil Jackson essentially confirmed that he at least got the call from Reinsdorf. So Reinsdorf isn't lying in regards to at least extending the offer to Phil. I think where it gets murky is, did Phil have any real interest, and did Reinsdorf essentially offer it knowing it was going to be a no? That's what I would be interested in. The follow-up question I would have had is, okay, you made the call. Did you realistically expect him to consider coming back given everything that had happened, or was that just almost like a CYA of Reinsdorf? Like, hey, look, I asked, and he said no.
Yeah, I think it's more of what you said. I mean, Reinsdorf was like, yeah, I asked knowing what the answer was going to be because, I mean, I guess the key part is Phil. I think Jordan's right outside of probably Pippen. I think Pippen would have taken a lot more convincing than what, Jordan says or thinks. But it's like if Phil doesn't come back, none of those guys come back. And I think Jordan has the good point, though. If Krause and Reinsdorf, if they just shut up at the beginning of 1998 or the beginning of that season,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a way better chance.
No,
Well,
absolutely.
and on top of that, I think too it would have been interested. It would have been interesting to know, hey, we asked Pippen to come back. Jordan was willing to sign a 1 year contract. Was he willing to take maybe a discount on that 1 year to be able to pay Pippen more, knowing that Pip essentially deserved more money? I mean, this is like a waterfall of questions that would come from this follow up. I don't, not that I don't think the Reinsdorf offer to Jackson was sincere. I just think he didn't. I don't think there was any realistic way he was going to take it. And I think Reinsdorf knew that when he asked the question. Just because I feel like if Phil comes back, you're essentially. I think the next difficult decision you have to make is I don't think there's any way Phil comes back and Krause stays. So if Phil comes back, Krause is walking or resigning. There's no way Krause is sticking around for this.
That relationship was just so much ruined. By that point, there was no chance you're going to get both of them back in the building. And I guess it made more sense to them at the time to keep Krause for whatever reason, because, you heard Reinsdorf say, I'm pretty confident Krause could have had another successful rebuild, with some of these guys. Because he made it sound like, okay, you're going to get MJ and you're just going to have to like pretty much get rid of everyone, maybe keep a couple of role players and then do like a successful rebuild. Well, guess what? 22 freaking years later, and where are we at right now? Rebuilding again.
I felt like that last little line there at the end was the ultimate dig on what the Bulls are currently experiencing still to this day, more than 20 years later.
Yeah, and that was putting it lightly. Like they pretty much said, the Bulls began the rebuild. It's like, yeah, you could have said, man, they're still
dot.
Yeah, dot.
Yeah, it's like,
Oh.
if you need to grab a drink at any point just to feel better about things, that's probably the point at which it needs to happen.
That's the galling thing is we talked last week after we went off the air just because I didn't want to spoil it for anyone that didn't want it spoiled, and I knew this question of they were really close to being able to run this thing back for another year was going to come up, but it's still even though I knew it was coming, it was still just as painful. It was still just as shocking to see Jordan's reaction. And Jim White in the comments, when he called Phil, did he tell him it was going to be a rebuild? The impression I got from the conversations of what we saw in the documentary is Phil never mentioned that in his comments that we saw.
No.
But Reinsdorf talking about it, what the clip Jordan saw, Reinsdorf was saying Phil didn't have any interest in a rebuild. So I don't know. I don't know if he told Phil it was a rebuild when he called him. I think that's only a question Phil can really answer if we get more bonus footage out of this, which I'm sure we will get a ton of.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I feel like they're going to milk this for all it's worth, and they should. But I feel like that's an unanswered question right now. And if Phil didn't want to be part of a rebuild, he's well within his rights. But I feel like if you're bringing back Phil, Michael's coming back. At that point, you can probably convince Pip to come back. It's a short lockout season, as we all know. At that point, you can get – Jordan has a good point. He's like, you don't think Judd and Steve would have come back on one-year deals if we asked them to.
Right.
And so I think there's a lot more credence to maybe what Phil and Jordan said than what Reinsdorf said. And that's nothing against Reinsdorf. I just feel like some of his comments were kind of a CYA.
Yeah, I mean, it just I don't know if that was more meant to, calm the nerves and the frustrations of everybody that's out there, that's kind of thought to themselves, oh, well, that chance never happened, or, really it's been such an open-ended question to, what did occur, and just, I don't know, like, the more I'm starting to think about it, the more I'm just like, God, it's like the comments that Reinsdorf made when they were showing that last championship parade at Grant Park, and him just talking about, it feels so good to put a smile on, these fans' faces and to give them happiness. You guys are the ones who took it away. Like, you took it away. Like, all you had to do was keep doing it, and you didn't. Well, and it's like, why?
And here's the other thing about the rebuild is the rebuild only makes sense in my opinion, and I know this is coming from a very biased point of view, but I'll try to make it as neutral as possible. The rebuild, in my mind, only makes sense is if you're getting rid of these guys and getting high ROI out of them leaving. Pippen was traded for I think maybe like a second-round pick, maybe a first-round pick, and Eddie Griffin or something. I mean, it was somebody like not of note. I mean, it wasn't a big deal. I mean, Matt Maloney might have been in that deal. Just it was a bunch of garbage, really. At the end of the day, you cut Rodman, Jordan walks for nothing, Kerr's traded for a hill of beans. I mean, the only way Krause, in my mind, had a logical argument for the rebuild is if you like pull off a trade like the T-Mac trade from the year before, where you trade Pippen for this high first-round pick and you turn it into this stud building block. They didn't do that. So there's really no excuse for the rebuild post-98 because you got no ROI out of those guys leaving at all.
Well, and he backed himself into a corner like Jerry Krause did.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody knew what was going on. Everybody knew what the plan was going to be. And especially when you're talking about, and even Michael Jordan said it when they were talking about the one-year deals, like you'd have to convince Scotty. You're talking about like the number one person who is, if that all did occur, the most against it potentially happening. Of course, you're not going to get anything of value for him. Like it just in hindsight, it's like, what the hell were you thinking? That's ultimately what it comes down to.
The only planet that this makes sense to me is if somehow Krause was able to fleece a team and trade Pippen for a high first-round pick in that draft, or somehow get T-Mac back, a player of like a young player of T-Mac's caliber that had been in the league for a couple years, hadn't done much, but he had that high upside. At that point, then you can say, all right, Phil's back, Michael's back, Pippen doesn't want to come back, but we at least got this really valuable asset for him. But none of that happened. So I don't understand how you can rationalize the rebuild when most rebuilds in our mind, we think you're trading away assets to get valuable assets to help the rebuild. This was just the Bulls tearing it down for no real reason and getting nothing, essentially nothing.
Yeah, and I mean to your point with the timing of the rebuild too. I mean, you look at that season; it was a lock. You know, it was the lockout year. It was like how many games were there? Like 50 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you look, and so okay, you have looking at that rebuild. Okay, so you're going to be going up against the Lakers, who have Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal at that time. They're starting to kind of build up in the West. You have the Jazz, who are still a pretty damn good team. Indiana, I don't remember what pieces they lost and what they might have added, but I mean, they still had Reggie Miller at the time. I mean, they were still a legit team. You had Portland, who was kind of on the come up. You had, I believe the Knicks team was pretty damn good. The Spurs were good. So it's like,
well, the Spurs won the championship the next season in the lockout. They beat the 8-seeded Knicks.
Yeah, and it's like, I just don't know if the timing of the rebuild was right for them. I think they would have had a better chance of running it back with that 7th title in mind, just because it is. It's such a short season; anything can happen. And you can essentially, you get off to a hot start, you can essentially rest Michael and Scotty for a couple of games if you have to.
Well, and here's the Pip trade. The trade from the Bulls to the Rockets was Pippen was traded to the Rockets for Roy Rogers and a 2000 second-round draft pick, which eventually the Bulls used to select Jake Voskuhl. Like, that's what you got for Scottie Pippen.
God. Oh, God,
yeah,
that's
let
painful.
that sink
That
in.
is
that was the key trade of the rebuild.
Oh, gosh. Man, that just to hear the names involved is a painful memory. to say the least, but it's rough just to see how quickly it all came apart. And really, I mean, you can even look to that 98-99 roster and just look at it like top to bottom. It's just like, what happened? Like, there's some teams where it's slowly chiseled away. This was literally like scorched earth, bring in the napalm, just tear everything out and just be done with it. Like it just, God.
In an underrated aspect of bringing Michael and some of these guys back, even if you somehow don't bring Pippen back and Jordan agrees to come back because Phil's there, you still have Tony Kukoc who's able to step in and fill those minutes that, I mean, he's not the level of player Pippen is, but Kukoc was a high-level NBA player. So you kind of start rearranging the pieces around that. So now you have Michael and Tony. I mean, you're assuming guys like Kerr and Longley and stuff come back, which is actually interesting. Is I don't know if you guys picked that up this week, but Longley actually refused to be interviewed for this documentary. We never saw him because he does not have a good relationship with Jordan, and I didn't find that out until this week.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that. I knew.
Yeah, I forget where I heard that. I think it was on one of the 30 for 30 podcast that Jason Hare does right afterwards for ESPN. I think that's where I heard it at, but I know for sure I heard that this week.
So his relationship with Michael is not very good?
No.
Oh, wow. And I mean, another guy that didn't get interviewed that I saw, he got a lot of praise on Twitter for coming on that bus at the end and congratulating anyone's hands, but he won't do the damn interview. Karl Malone. And Bomani Jones had a good tweet. It was, does anyone outside the state of Louisiana or Utah like Karl Malone? And I don't think anyone does, to be honest.
That did surprise me. And even not only that, but, this is the thing. And a lot of times on the court, the players get, trash forward for, not shaking hands on the court in the public eye. But even, outside of the locker rooms, we see Michael come through the curtain and here's John Stockton and Karl Malone shaking hands, good game, see you guys later, all of that stuff. Yeah. It's like
casual
the Larry Bird exchange was
yes,
the best.
It was. just seeing all that behind the scenes and just everything that it meant to, the relationships that Michael Jordan had with those players dating back to the Dream Team. It was great seeing it, and honestly, that did shock me too. That really did shock me seeing him come on the bus through all of that, through the celebration. I mean, that does take a lot. It truly does, and that's not a guy that I ever liked ever watching, regardless. I mean, even to that last year that he tried going to the Lakers to win the championship only to get his ass beat by the Pistons in the finals, which I loved. I loved. It just like that made me think, okay, maybe he's not a terrible guy. that was
no. I just think he puts his foot in his mouth a lot because honestly, I never had a problem with Karl Malone as a kid growing up. I just didn't like him because he was a Bulls opponent, but I never had any sort of like personal issue with him. I just think he's a guy now that you read some of the stuff later on he just is super inappropriate and puts his foot in his mouth a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you do a little bit of a Google on him and a little bit of a deep dive.
Google Karl Malone, Kobe Bryant beef.
Yeah, he's not a very good guy.
just in general. I mean, I don't want to say that Salt Lake City and Utah just rubbed off on him, but I mean that is not my favorite place. It never has been my favorite place, and I mean we kind of started backwards here with the end of episode 10, but rewinding back to episode 9 and the pizza. And the crowds and everything, and it just the anger just boiled inside of me, just listening to this and literally seeing that there were people in this town that deliberately tried to harm Michael Jordan so their basketball team could win a championship, and it just like you can never trust a town that doesn't allow you to walk into a restaurant and just buy a damn beer, like. Plain and simple.
Yeah.
And that's Salt Lake City.
And it was, they said pretty much it was 10 o'clock and everything was closed.
Yeah, that's how it is still today, which is weird enough.
Let me ask you guys this. So with the flu game, it's obviously called the flu game. Okay. That's how we all refer to it. Did you ever hear that story?
Yes.
About the pizza? Okay. I did too.
I heard it was food. I knew for years there'd been food poisoning.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was from specifically pizza. I didn't have the culprit, but I knew it. I knew it was food poisoning.
Yeah, I've heard the food poisoning. I heard it was like takeout, or they had to get like delivery or something. I don't remember if I've heard if it was like pizza or not. I always heard that one. I heard he went to Las Vegas and gambled that whole night, which is completely utter nonsense. But yeah, I was kind of shocked that like on Twitter, I mean, I said something, food poisoning or like the pizza, don't eat it in Utah. I was kind of shocked that a lot of people didn't hear the whole, the food poisoning theory. I thought it was a lot bigger than what people kind of made it out to be on Twitter leading into this episode.
The more popular theory I'd always heard, Zach, was a hangover theory, which by at this point we know like Michael Jordan just doesn't get hangovers, so that kind of gets thrown out the window.
He's Black Jesus.
Yeah. That opening sequence of episode 9 was unbelievable. Reggie Miller, it was so good because Reggie Miller's. I've heard Reggie Miller tell that story before on open court, and it's hilarious because it was I forget what it was. I don't know if it was a preseason game or an early season game, like he said, but he had like 10 at halftime, and he finished the game with 12, and Michael ended with like 35 points or something.
And it just, I mean, even that, like the whole sequence, and just like the team and everything, like that Indiana stood for, and just the Reggie Miller era, and just how much I despised that team, and then Rick Smith's bald ass head.
Oh, God.
I loved that Pacers like era only because they would just I loved that rivalry they had with the Knicks, and I hated the Knicks more than the Pacers. So it was kind of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend type deal with Reggie Miller and the Pacers. But I want to get on something too. I'm sure it was going to come up, but thinking about stuff that fans may not know. That Steve Kerr segment, I hesitate to call it a segment. That feels like they downplayed it, but that Steve Kerr like span of time was unbelievably well done, and I'd be interested to know how many people knew. I know about Steve Kerr's dad and the way he died, but I'll be interested to see kind of the reaction on Twitter and from conversations with people about how many people didn't know that.
Count me in that camp. I did not know that there was that big of a backstory to it. That just watching it, and you're just like, holy shit, like this is real. And just all of it, and to see how he took that tragedy and turned it into fuel, and just the entire thing, like it blew my mind. It literally blew my mind. I mean, I can't put into words. Just like when I'm just like looking at him, like, wait, this happened. This actually happened.
Because he doesn't talk
Right.
about it. Like
Yeah.
you know, I feel like many people don't know because it's not talked about, and he obviously doesn't speak about it because it's obviously still very emotionally jarring for him even all these years later.
Yeah, I'm with you. I didn't know that story either. And now it kind of makes sense why he's always talking about when when there's like gun violence and stuff. He's always on Twitter talking about something like, and now it makes a lot more sense. I had no clue about that story, but it was the Steve Kerr part was really damn good. And leading into that, where you got Michael and him on the bench before he hits the game winner, and then he tells like the funny story at the rally. That was awesome. That was probably one of my favorite interviews. And Steve Kerr is a very intelligent man. Like
Yeah, he's a great interview
very
too.
smart. He is very great detail. And it's just that was probably one of my favorite interviews of the whole thing.
That Steve Kerr deal was great, where he's on the bench on that story. He's like Michael's trying to mumble because he knows cameras are on him, and I'll be ready, and he's just like yelling back at him, like
You
not playing along with
rookie.
it all. And then the rally story is great. I posted something on Twitter. It's like, could you imagine after Steve Kerr did that speech at the championship rally, had he been traded, Michael Jordan would have made that a reason to drop like 80 points.
Oh my God. The story about Russell, I never knew that.
I know.
That
Mhm.
holy
Russell talked
hell.
all the time.
Oh my
just
God.
the climactic piece that was Brian Russell to then that entire thing, and just everything that he stood for from beginning to end with that first retirement to that last shot. Like it's like a made for the movies. Like honestly, you could not have pieced that better together, on top of the ever, never going away, idea of don't piss Michael Jordan off. What happened?
Yes.
Pissed him off, and not only got his revenge once, got it twice with that shot over him in 96, 97 in Chicago that gave him the series lead there too. It's like, dude, like again, does nobody care that this is an ongoing
and
theme?
then Jordan busted on him in his Hall of Fame speech. Do you remember the big hullabaloo out that, where Jordan actually called Russell out again in his Hall of Fame induction speech? And I was like, dude, let it go. This is just not Mike, though.
So this kind of seems to be a trend because I nitpick on this a lot, and they've left some stuff out in this 10-part documentary, and they left two more things out in this one on I can't remember if it was a mixture, maybe episode 9 and 10. So correct me if I'm wrong here. They didn't once bring up Malone choking at the free throw line and the Scottie trash talk.
because that was right before Jordan's first game winner over Russell.
Yeah, so they didn't bring that up. That I thought that would have been a good storyline, and they didn't bring up I think it was before the flu game where Michael said, "Is it Byron or Brian?" And then Russell said, "Well, is it Michael or Michelle?"
Oh, I
haven't heard that one either.
So it's on the what is it? It's on the Stuart Scott recap of the flu game, like the Sports Center highlights, and he goes into like a story of like how Michael at one of the post game press conferences or something was like, "Is it Byron or Brian?" And then Russell kind of fought, was like, "Oh, is it Michael or Michelle?" And it just kind of pissed off Jordan right before the flu game, or it was either before the flu game or the game going back to after the flu game, obviously going back to Chicago.
I really think I'm a little shocked with the Malone missing the two free throws that didn't make the cut, only because I think that would have been a really easy segue between like Malone won the MVP this year, chokes at the foul line, misses two, then Jordan comes down, and you kind of have that symmetry of that storyline you're telling. The Russell thing, I never knew the Michael Michelle thing. I'll have to look into that because that's one thing I'll plead ignorance on. I had no idea.
Yeah, so I got it right here. So it's let's see, June 11th, 1997. Is it Byron or Brian? Mike Jordan asked. As usual, Brian Russell didn't back down. I can get him back. He said, "Is it Michael or Michelle?" And then
that's not even clever.
No, not at all. And I think
because honestly, I say Brian or Byron. Like I mix it up all the time.
I think I messed it up there. I don't even know. I mean, no offense. It's one of those names. It's like Byron or
he's going to be on his deathbed one day, and somebody's asking, "You have any regrets?" Well, I called MJ Michelle one time.
Yeah. Well, and let's be clear on one more thing here. There was one push-off showed in this damn documentary, and it was Reggie Miller pushing
Miller.
off Michael Jordan.
Yep. I mean, God, how blatant of a push off can one player get to get that wide open on a shot? And of all people, Reggie Miller.
Yeah, he was smart though, because he talked about it. He said, "Hey, I got
the officials call it."
Yeah, make the officials call it. And I think if it was the other way around too, if it was Jordan throwing Reggie Miller, I don't think they're gonna call it. Maybe
absolutely not.
Yeah, maybe with 6 minutes left in the game, you get that called. That's not getting called.
Well, and
the one thing about that clip I always want to know about, and I wish they would have interviewed Randy Brown for this, is where was Randy Brown going in the middle of that play? If you watch him, Randy Brown's on the bench, and when Miller shoots that shot, as it goes through, you see Randy Brown like walking along the baseline in his like warm-ups.
He's got his
Where
head
are you
down.
going?
Yeah, he's got his head down like he's wandering around the court.
Like, what are you doing and where are you going?
Well, just like the ironic thing about that entire series is at the end of Game 7, Larry Bird going up in front of the media and saying the refs sucked. The refs cost us that series. And it's like, you gotta win because of the refs.
They swallowed their whistle.
Yeah, and it's like you can't have it both ways. It's like, just play the game. Face the facts. You had Rick Smits go up against Michael Jordan on a jump ball, and you couldn't come away with it, despite the fact you have Bigfoot out there, your tallest dude, who had no reason whatsoever to tip that ball to one of his teammates. And it's like, just shut up. Seriously, just shut up.
I completely forgot that game. Was it 3 or 4? Was it game 4? That it was so close at the end that it was so wild down the stretch where Pippen missed those free throws that could have probably iced it. And then Reggie Miller hits that shot. And I had completely forgotten that Jordan basically rimmed out a game winner.
Me too. I completely forgot about that too. And watching that though again, they said how many seconds were left? Like 0.6?
0.7. 0.7.
Yeah, 0.7 or 0.8.
And
that was
a
long
0.7. Yeah, got the ball.
Hey, Derek Fisher got off a shot in 0.4. So you know what? That's an eternity.
Yeah, that was. I did forget that Jordan had a shot at the end. It rimmed out pretty much. That was why I think it was game 4 because game 3 was the what was it back in Indiana? That was the first Aaron game, I think it was.
That was the Indiana lady fan screaming obscenities at the camera.
The camera loved her.
Bring back opposing teams, like the themed car and letting people take the sledgehammer to it before games. You remember those?
That clip was hilarious because that guy tried to hot shot it and tried to like walk up spinning the sledgehammer and almost dropped it and then hit the car. I'm like, dude, and you're wearing like a polo shirt tucked into jeans.
And it's like they had newspaper clippings on it. Like the car had nothing to do with the Bulls except for newspaper.
It was homecoming in Indianapolis.
It's like, can you just imagine like being that guy and being embarrassed back then of doing that? And it's like, oh, it's all over. And then national TV comes 25 years later. Oh, yeah, here you go. Like,
at least you're not recognizable now.
At least you hope so.
Yeah, you'd think.
I mean, it just, oh God, that whole sequence was just Indiana in a nutshell. for everything that happened, the marching band,
shout
out to Purdue, the big drum.
Like it just,
why?
Oh my God.
Like, it's like they're in Indianapolis, but like Purdue's band from West Lafayette just shows up and starts marching down the Capitol.
It's not even close to Indianapolis. Like West Lafayette's not even close. It's like, where did this come from? Why is this here?
They have the giant Kohl's banner. Yeah. The advertisement. As a kid, I'd always watch those games. I say, why the hell is Kohl's like everywhere in this damn stadium? And it showed up again. It's like, blast of past.
Yeah. And then and just everything that went into that series and just the back and forth and just, again, the fans were talked about so much and just the hype around everything. And then Game 7 comes. You know, what I took away, I think, one of the biggest things I took away from this whole series is how much Ahmad Rashad hung around Michael Jordan. Like, it was just like they were like brothers almost. I mean, it just seemed like everywhere that MJ was, Ahmad was right there. And it's like, then Ahmad just kind of like disappeared and never really reappeared when it came to, covering the NBA. after those years had passed there. But sitting in the locker room before Game 7, and Ahmad goes, some can, some can't, and MJ goes, "You're not allowed to talk to Scott Burrell. You're going to scare the shit out of him."
Poor Scott Burrell, man.
The funny part is I feel like all through this, someone was like, everything I read was, Scott Burrell's going to get redeemed at the end of this and everything. And the last time you really see Scott Burrell mentioned is MJ saying that if he sees him out, he's going to fight him in a bar.
Barroom brawl. And he's going in the corner plugging his ears like, "Oh, I don't hear you. I don't hear you."
So speaking of Ahmad Rashad, I had to look it up again and make sure I'm correct. Have you guys seen this photo? So it's the wedding of Cosby Show star Felicia Rashad and former pro football player Ahmad Rashad. So he married a Cosby Show star. His wedding party, O.J. Simpson, Bill Cosby.
Ouch.
Yeah. So there's a photo of him at the altar. It's Cosby, Rashad, and O.J. in their suit and their tuxedos, and it's just like, all right. But dude, yeah, I mean, Ahmad Rashad probably had the coolest job ever.
He did.
Like, got to host NBA Inside Stuff. Got to be Michael Jordan's best friend. Like he talked to Phil Jackson in the documentary a couple times. The guy is awesome, and I didn't know he was like 73 years old, which is wild to me.
I did not think he was that old.
No, I thought he's like a guy that like it'll be 30 years from now, and you'll be like, oh yeah, Ahmad Rashad's like 40 still. Like, he's really
like Michael Jordan's mom.
Yeah. Oh my God, does not age.
No, hasn't aged today.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, poor Scott Burrell, man.
Hey, he knew it was over. He got a championship ring out of it. That's all he needed, right? Moving further, past that Eastern Conference final and into that last series with the Jazz. I'm glad that they did make the story out of Rodman and Rodzilla and WCW after Game 3.
Yeah.
I'm like they have to do this. Like, they were talking up Game 3 so much, and then they kind of just like stopped. Like they just kind of like changed like the rhythm. I'm like, oh yes, here it comes. Here's Hulk Hogan. Here's the whole thing, and boom. And it's like just everything that went into that, and then watching Rodman and the public relation team for the Bulls sneak him out a door, and one guy seeing it and just watching them all fly up the flight of stairs to try and catch him as he peels off in the truck. Just that whole sequence was glorious. Absolutely glorious.
Can we talk about for a second how Rodman was clearly drunk behind the sunglasses? Like when they showed that close-up of his face, clearly inebriated, in pajama pants, cutting promos in a wrestling ring, and then hitting Diamond Dallas Page with a steel folding chair. I believe twice. Like,
I remember watching that as a kid. Like, I remember watching Rodman in the NWO. I never really put it together. I mean, I'm sure I did back then that it was happening during the NBA Finals. Like, not before the NBA Finals, during the damn NBA Finals, he's leaving. Yeah, he's leaving to go into Auburn Hills to freaking do a wrestling promo with Hulk Hogan. It's wild. And then, like, they're sitting around. He's got, like, all the girls with him. They're drinking. And Hogan's like, oh, what's better? This is so much better than practice or something like that. And Rodman's just laughing.
And they made a joke about it. It was hilarious. Like, it seemed like he came back and the team didn't really care because the thing is, they had bigger fish to fry. They knew they needed him. So, like, beating them over the head about it wasn't going to help them at all. But, yeah, well, the funny part is then eventually Karl Malone came, and they had DDP and Karl Malone had a tag match against Hogan and Rodman at some pay-per-view event I can't recall. So
it all comes full circle.
Yep.
Yeah, that was awesome. Have you ever seen the intro? Remember the one he's coming in the limousine? Mm-hmm. The Rodman intro on Nitro? Great. Fantastic.
The Monday Night War is the heyday of wrestling back in the day, but it just that whole sequence, and like you mentioned, like the joking about the practice, it's like, Allen Iverson's got nothing on what Dennis Rodman pulled off, and just the fact, like, you have to see like that swarm of reporters, and again the public relations team, like, we have 300 people out there Dennis says he doesn't have anything to say to him. And so somehow we got to figure out how to get him out of here without anybody seeing him. And then Phil Jackson, you can tell, is like very irritable towards everything that's being asked of him, saying, you guys are the ones who are losing your focus. Our focus is on this finals. And just going on and on about that. And then as you see the team break from the huddle, like you mentioned, like pajama pants, like standing there on the outskirts of everything.
Soccer sandals. He was in flip-flops and socks.
We didn't hear if MJ had to go across the street to drag him out of bed again, but
yeah,
I mean, it wouldn't. I don't think it would shock anybody at this point if that were to be the case. But just everything about that, it's like, that's Dennis. And then he goes off the next game, 14 rebounds, like it's nothing, and all of a sudden it's, everything's back to normal. Like, he gives you 100, and he even said it, when I'm out on the court, you get 100% out of me. And he did what he did best, and that's rebound the hell out of the ball for 48 minutes.
Well, and it's crazy too, is when this kind of ties into talking about trying to bring Rodman back the next year, if they could bring him back, or you basically try to find somebody to replace his rebounding defense, because he was 36 or 37 at the time. Looking at it now, Rodman only played in another 35 games in the NBA after that. He played 23 the next year with the Lakers and 12 the year after that with the Mavericks, and then he was out of the league. So you really kind of see, too, how instrumental Phil, Michael, and Scotty were in getting the most out of him at that point in his life with everything he was going through, and just not able to control him, because you really don't control a guy like Rodman, but getting the most out of him and channeling the energy when you needed it at the most important times.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's weird just to see how much he was reeled in. I mean, even when you're talking about like before the Bulls days, when he was with San Antonio and just everything that he went through there, it's weird to see, what it took to get him to play. And it honestly does make you wonder, like, if things did turn out a specific way with certain people in place, what possibly could have happened. But again, from the Vegas vacation to the wrestling, it's like, what else could he have done? Like, it's almost like a scary thought to think, what else could Dennis Rodman have done while playing for the Bulls?
The more I'm sitting here thinking about it, and we're kind of circling back to where we started talking about running this back for another year and how close it was, is I really think the Bulls would have had a good shot at sneaking a seventh. If it were a full NBA season, I don't know, but just the way things lined up with it being a lockout shortened year, looking at the 98-99 Bulls roster, I mean, even without Jordan, you had Kukoc, Ron Harper was still there, Wennington was still around. You could have kept Kerr. You bring MJ back. They had They brought Brent Barry in, so that's an interesting. I mean, he's a talented player. You're never going to replace Scottie Pippen, but I think the one wild card here would have been Pippen and what you replace him with if he's not there. And because in Rodman, I mean, if Rodman's not there, what do you replace him with? Or can you get him focused in for 50 more games?
Yeah, and it was kind of interesting to hear Michael at the end talk about, in the 90s or the 91, he was young, hungry, full of energy. And then in, 98, he was kind of running on fumes. He was more tactical with his game. But I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, he said that was probably when he was at his best, when he was at his peak, was kind of even in those like 97, 96, 98 kind of seasons. Just because of how he had to change his game, and he was aging and his body was wearing down, running on fumes. But yeah, I mean, it would have been interesting. I think the lockout obviously would have helped them with the shortened season.
Well, look at who made the finals out of the East, the lockout season.
Yeah, the Knicks.
Eight, and they were the 8th seed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're looking at the East isn't very strong, and you're taking on a San Antonio team that isn't the San Antonio that we come to know in the mid to late 2000s when their dynasty starts. It's kind of Duncan is a rookie in his second year. Yeah. They really aren't a proven commodity yet. Robinson is on the way downside of his career at this point. I think only has 3 or 4 more years left. So, I mean, you're not beating, you're not taking on a world beater like you were facing the Jazz and the Sonics and a lot of these teams. I mean, if you can construct a decent team for 50 games, I think you have a real
Well,
shot.
and not only that, but with the whole talk, and again, it was anybody's guess how many games they actually could have gotten in at that point in time when all these decisions were being made. But the fact that there was all the talk during the documentary about we didn't want to hang on to this too long and watch things kind of deteriorate. 50 games for a roster with that average of an age is like a godsend.
Well, and what the documentary doesn't touch on either is that everyone knew this lockout was coming. This lockout wasn't like the MLB strike where it kind of came out of where the ultimate result of the strike was the cancellation of the World Series and all that. Like that was pretty unexpected. People knew this lockout was coming with all the issues with the CBA. So you have to factor that in. I just think regardless of how many games that season would have been, Krause was just over it.
Jerry.
Yeah, what could have been? What did you guys? Before we kind of wrap things up, what did you guys think of the behind the scenes footage in this one? I thought it was actually pretty good, better than what we've seen in the past. And the one that I really loved, Michael Jordan had a damn piano in his room and
that was so awesome.
Not lying. And the footage of them walking through the hotel and stuff, that was fantastic. That's the behind the scenes I want to see.
Is this the smoking floor? Quote, it is now.
It is now. They're just casually just carrying the trophy down the hall. There's just a group of people in Michael's room. He's just playing the piano. Oh, it was just fantastic.
It was great. The behind the scenes footage the last like 3 or 4 episodes has been great. The episodes 9, 10, and then 8 and 7, in my opinion, have been were easily the best 4 of the whole series.
I think in addition to that, I mean, like you mentioned, the hotel footage. I mean, compared to what they would allow today, it's night and day.
Yeah.
I mean, for good reason though, obviously, but
even the Pippen stuff during the game with his back, how they were allowed to go in the trainer's room and kind of watch them do that was great stuff as well.
And just watching Phil come in and turn off the TV when they're seeing the report about his back, and it's like, okay, and then as it built on, it's like, you knew he had the issues, but just having them be that bad, and the more you watch him, and obviously in the moment it's a little bit harder to focus on that aspect because obviously you're more focused on the Bulls winning a championship, but to see him struggle that much and to really focus in on him and his facial expressions and everything that he put into that game, literally laying it out all on the line, it's like, damn, like the fact he even made it to the end of the game is a miracle. And it's not even, a given that he goes out there for Game 7. And if that does happen, do the Bulls even win without Scottie Pippen? And
I think so.
Yeah. And he contributed in Game 6. He said it was a decoy for a lot of the game, but I mean, he played, given what his back injury was, he played a solid enough game. That's the scary part about that back injury. It was a lower back injury, and for anyone who's ever had back injuries, if it's middle or upper back, it's you can manage it a little bit more. Lower back, I mean, you can't move your trunk. You can't turn. It hurts to walk and run. Just where all that. It's for him to play and be out there as much as he was. I think I looked at the box. I was looking at the box score during the documentary. I think he played 25 or 26 minutes that game on basically a shot back.
It hurt me to watch him kind of hop up and down the court.
Yeah, holy like the jogging. It's like, holy hell. Like, I've seen 80-year-old men run better than Scottie Pippen.
And speaking on Pippen, too, is I've seen some stuff on Twitter this week where they feel like Scottie Pippen's kind of getting slighted in this doc. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't feel like he has. Like, even in his worst moment with the 94 Knicks playoff series, you immediately cut to like the Steve Kerr thing, like, hey, there was this emotional thing in the locker room. He apologized. We all forgave him. We love Scottie. He's a great teammate. He's one of the nicest guys that you could ever wish to be around. So I feel like even in like his worst moment, it was pretty well counterbalanced. I don't know. I didn't get the impression he was kind of getting crapped on during this.
I kind of did. The fact that I think, I don't know, like the whole he quit and then a couple other things that were brought up. I don't remember, but I remember reading a lot of that stuff. and seeing that stuff that you're talking about on Twitter, I don't know. I feel like he was getting kind of the bad guy type treatment in a way, but it could have been a lot worse. Like I don't think the doc, was put out there to make him look like, oh, he's this awful person. He's going to quit on you whenever he can has a chance to. I just think, I mean, I feel like they could have gone a little more into how damn good he was without Jordan, and then kind of more of that, Batman Robin type role him and Jordan had.
That's fair. Maybe I'm misinterpreting people saying he's getting shortchanged with him getting kind of like shit on, for lack of a term.
I get in regard to that though. I feel like the question should have been answered to him in the documentary. Did playing through that, have any, flashback for you based on that, basically the Knicks thing, and just like and
the Knicks
quitting on your team, like did that factor into you fighting through this because that happened in the past? Because part of me wants to say that there was a little piece of him that said I can't do that to my team again.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, Bill Cartwright was a coach of that '98 team, wasn't he?
I believe so.
And he was the guy that, when they went to the locker room, he pretty much stood up and was the leader there. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good point. It's an interesting question. I think with Scotty, even if they had him come out and play the decoy, like you said, Nick, he was producing out there. I mean, he scored. He was making baskets. It wasn't like he was a complete decoy. And he did go back, and what they said was, they were trying to get him. So like, all right, you go sit out 10 minutes and try to get you ready to play 5 or 10 minutes.
Trying to space it around the TV timeouts they knew were coming.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think that helped a lot with that. I gotta imagine he probably had a flashback to quitting on his team and being like, but I mean, it's also a different scenario though. He has Jordan. He knows he doesn't have to be the guy. I'm sure he matured over that situation, over the 4 years it's been. So yeah, it's a good question though.
Even the question at the end, what was the plan at that last shot? And he just goes, "Get the hell out of the way."
Dennis Rodman's commentary was amazing on it.
Yeah. He's like, that motherfucker's taking the ball. He's shooting this ball. That was good. Listening to Jordan and Pippen and Rodman and Phil kind of break down that sequence, that was awesome. Because I've never heard, obviously no one's ever heard that, but that's just incredible. And I also enjoyed, as goofy as it sounds, I enjoyed those alternate celebration angles. Like you always see the TV broadcast angle, but like to see like the actual cameras in there, and you get the reverse of Jordan and Phil, where Antoine Carr's trying to say good game to him, and they're just kind of like, whatever, they're celebrating. And then you get to hear Michael and Phil on the podium, kind of the banter between them two. That was
like,
I
knew
really
it.
cool.
I knew it.
And we got to see that Gus got the game ball.
Yeah.
I mean, just that. Man.
I like that story too. That was a good
story. That
really
was fantastic.
Cool.
And really just seeing like the fact that he filled that void for Michael after his dad passed away, and just that whole thing. I'm glad they did make a point to that, and kind of going back to the entourage a little bit more, because there were some characters, as we saw earlier in this series, that really played into who Michael was and just what they meant to him during his time in Chicago. So that definitely was awesome to see that as well. Kind of touching on here this last thing, I know it was something that I think a lot of us were hoping that it would be touched on, the push off on Brian Russell, or the lack thereof. And I Bob Costas is a guy I have a love-hate relationship with when it comes to just his overall place in sports, demeanor, everything. But him saying, that push was the equivalent of a maitre d' showing someone to their table, like that's I'm just
so many levels.
That is beautiful, and it works so well, and I'm so damn glad he said it, on top of everybody else just piling on, like basically to the city of Salt Lake City and the state of Utah, shut the hell up. It wasn't a push off.
You know how you know it's not a push off and that it doesn't matter? It's the same reason why after the Reggie Miller push off on Jordan, Jordan didn't complain to the refs. No one went after the refs on it. Is that's just guys out there playing. And Casas made a good point, and they showed that really great baseline angle of it. Is Russell was already kind of stumbling and slipping that way anyway. And there's that one angle where it actually looks like Jordan's wrist is turned, and it's like you can't really push off that hard when your hand's at that angle anyway. It's like, see ya, goodbye. I'm just going to hit
like
this shot.
His wrist and hand just kind of go down his leg versus like pushing out.
Yeah.
I mean that's all you need. All the evidence is there, except the color commentator at the time.
I've never heard a Utah player complain about it. I've never heard Brian or Byron Russell complain about it. And so if they're not going to complain about it, no fan has a right to complain about it.
Speaking of Utah players, the fact that John Stockton was the only guy,
only one,
that was a little surprising because I was not expecting there to be just one. And I know they tried to sprinkle in some Jerry Sloan at the podium afterwards during the post games, and I really enjoyed the 54-point outing and him saying, "Well, this is the final box score." Like it's just like, damn, like you got your ass whooped, 96-54.
Yeah, they should have had. I mean, I wish Malone would have talked. He probably should have talked. I'd be very curious to see and to hear why his reasoning was why he didn't talk. Just because, I mean, you saw the respect there from Jordan. Them two, obviously, they respect each other, but it's like, only get Stockton. And we talked about this last week. There really wasn't many options. So it's Stockton, Hornacek,
Ostertag maybe,
Carr maybe.
If you could have gotten Brian Russell, that would have been a thing.
There was no
part of me wonders if they just dug in a little bit further on Russell because he turned them down. Like
yeah,
could have been.
But yeah, I mean, there really wasn't many that they could have gotten. Like we said, that Utah team was kind of just blah.
Guys.
Yeah, it had two or three.
There weren't a ton of personalities on that team. I mean, there were some good basketball players, but I mean, no one that you really care to hear from.
Yeah, but also look at the city they had to live in and play in. So it's like
our condolences.
Not many personalities. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a unique place. That's all we'll say about that. It's a unique place.
Never been, only heard stories. So
I've never been. I've just heard the people are incredibly
scenic. I think that's about all you can say.
You wish you were in the mountains the entire time rather than in the apparently.
100%.
I had one more question though. Are we a little getting more from Jordan's
That was
kids?
surprising that it took this long to hear from them, but to hear them say,
not shocked we didn't hear from Juanita.
I was shocked that it took this long, but to hear them say the things they did about just the Jazz and their fans, it was just like, that falls in line with a lot of assumptions that I had.
Yeah, I was a little shocked we didn't hear more about more from his kids, but you really look at a lot of the footage, like his kids aren't in a lot of it.
Yeah.
Like even the stuff on the road, like it's not. So I feel like they were very insulated from the media circus that was Michael Jordan. So maybe they just weren't around it as
really,
much.
to Jordan's credit, that probably was a good thing, to keep them out of that circus and keep them away from the pitfalls of it. Ultimately, I mean, they did have, or at least one or two of them had their pitfalls, but at the same time, I'd say that was more than anything just good parenting by Michael Jordan. Yeah.
Yes, that's smart.
So, yeah. God.
Yeah. Other than that, I mean, I don't know. I hope we get the bonus episodes.
They got to come.
No,
Netflix has got to drop something for us. Something.
Well, I don't know if you guys saw on Twitter. I think it was, I don't remember which host it was. Either Waddle or Sylvie tweeted out they're going to interview the director tomorrow, and they mentioned, like, can we get him to release the bonus episodes? So I think they know there's bonus episodes, but they have them just in case. But I don't know, because they're moving everything up. Like next week is Lance Armstrong. There's 2 parts to that. Then there's Sosa McGuire, and there's 2 parts of what Bruce Lee? I
You know,
believe is
they
the
have
next
Roy
the one after
Halladay
that.
coming up too here pretty soon. So it's
Yeah.
one after
Yep.
another. I know that they're trying to churn out here before live sports hopefully takes us back to our or as much of a normalcy as we can potentially get here. NASCAR was today. That
Mhm.
I thought I was going to tune in. Not.
I'm good.
That was a hard pass
There
for
were a
me.
lot of
Yeah.
crashes. That's all I heard. There were a lot of crashes.
I'm good.
But you know, there's a lot, and I mean, fingers crossed we'll hear something. Maybe they'll drop something tomorrow as an extra, you know, little nugget for us now that it's at the forefront of everybody's minds and the fact that it's over. You got to keep something going, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I would have just liked, I just kind of would have liked not another episode, but maybe a little more on what happened after they left and like how instead of just putting it on the screen, maybe just kind of talking a little bit about what actually happened dismantling that team, maybe like 10, 15 minutes, but
I don't need to see the Bryce Drew era. I'm good.
Meh.
I was good with the way it ended. I know what happened. I lived it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, well, that's
fair.
going to do it here for us. Thank you guys for tuning in these last 5 weeks as we have had fun here recapping everything about The Last Dance and reliving the greatest dynasty in Chicago sports by and large of the 90s Bulls, specifically the 97-98 Bulls, but just all the stories and just everything that went into this has been absolutely fantastic. And I guess now we have to turn our attention back to football, right, Nick?
Yeah, totally. Cover the some sort of XFL expansion draft if they ever come back. Just do live broadcasts of
Hey, they're
that,
for sale. XFL's for sale. You
Let's
can
do
actually
it.
buy them.
Let's do it.
dude.
Let
Yeah, how much money's in that CCS account?
We could probably buy maybe some shoulder pads or
sold.
something for the
Sweet.
Sold.
Just sponsor them.
Well, where's Cardale Jones' shoulder pads? We'll buy those. Well, we got hopefully again some live sports coming up here, whether it's baseball if that ever gets around to things, or if OTAs, training camp, and all that fun stuff for football ever does decide to pop up here, depending on everything else going on with this ongoing stay-at-home order. But hey, at least we got we had this, and we got some more fun stuff coming up here. But we'll be sure to do more of these. Yeah, a lot of left turns, Hector. A lot of left turns is all we have right now, and some soccer overseas. But
very. I watched. I'm a big soccer guy. Loved it on Saturday. It was a little weird getting used to the no fans, but it was pretty refreshing.
there's something, right? There's something. But yeah, we'll have plenty to talk about here. We'll be back with these live reactions and everything else going on as we get more into sports throughout this year. But it's been a pleasure, guys, and I know we all talk daily here, but it's been fun. It definitely has been fun.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can do something. We'll figure out. Maybe we can do something for the Sosa McGuire doc. We can do a live react to that too. So
Yeah, 3 weeks.
Roids.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's Andrew Steendion, Steven.
You know, you get some journalists running through lockers, finding some bottles. You know,
Yeah.
Need the whole story. And then obviously Sammy Sosa pretending he doesn't know how to speak English. All the fun stuff. But until then, again, hopefully everybody has a fantastic week. Hopefully everybody's enjoyed The Last Dance and everything that's gone into this. And yeah, again, hopefully we'll see some bonus episodes. But have a great rest of your evening.
Yep.
As always, stay into ChiCitySports.com for the latest, and check out the forums too. Talk some sports or the lack thereof and everything else going on. And yeah, sooner or later we'll get back to it, but we'll see. Right? Right. All right. Have a good night, everybody.